Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family. It's delightful to be able to welcome you to this evening's rather unique event, because not every night on Book of Mormon's Perspectives forums do we talk about Elvis Presley. But to recognize that there is some kind of connection between romantic love and divine love means that I am pleased to welcome our guest, Robert Messick. He is the expert on Book of Mormon editions, and he's returning to share Elvis and the book. He has collected 120 editions of the Book of Mormon, 80 of which are unique, and that's according to his earlier report. However, he emphasizes that the message of the Book of Mormon is far more important than the collection. So we will be conducting archaeological research on the site of the 1840 publication this summer, and that's on the site of Water and Main Street in Nauvoo. And I do want to invite people that are available to come dig with us. The webpage is idignauvoo.com, and we'll be digging from May 15 to June 16 of 2023. The volunteers are most welcome, and that's the way we accomplish virtually all of our work. And it's a tremendous thing to be able to find those tiny pieces of type representing that 1840 Book of Mormon. So anyway, I want to welcome Robert Messick back. Thank you very much for coming in and making yourself available to us. I would invite you to join me in the prayer. Alma 3:17 says, "And their souls did expand, and they did sing redeeming love." And thus we read in the scripture, O Lord, and we glimpse it in Elvis. We see it lived out in the life of Rena, now moved to the eternal dimension. And while we miss her, we pray for all her friends whom she has left with a sense of loss, a devastating sensation. And ask that your comforting spirit attend to heal our hearts, to remind us to sing in the redeeming love, to embrace relationships of virtue and be uplifted by angels close at hand, and those also sent from above. This evening we seek the balance between love romantic and divine, knowing both have their place, closely related, both in their own way sublime. And as we reflect upon this mystery of God, a scriptural message with its profound reminder to encourage our souls to expand, we see love in new measure as we share hand in hand. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfilled. Oh, my darling, I love you, and I always will. Love me tender, love me dear, tell me you are mine. I'll be yours through all the years, till the end of time. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfilled. Oh, my darling, I love you, and I always will. May our love relationships bridge the chasms between where we are and redemption, fully being with you, O Lord. Amen. Robert, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm so excited to join you. I can see everybody in a show of thumbs up. Can people hear me all right and things like that? Okay, very good. So the topic that I want to discuss is real interesting, and how it came about was a good friend of mine, Stephen Pineacker from Mormon Book Reviews. Many of you know him. He does a YouTube series, and so because of it, he called me. He says, dude, you got to know this. And you know the Stephen Pinecker excitement. He says, dude, I just learned about Elvis in the Book of Mormon. I was like, okay, tell me more. And so because of it, I wanted to present to you today. Let me start sharing my screen so that I've got some details for you. Okay.
We can
So,
see it.
can everyone see it?
Yep.
All right. So there was a TV show called To Tell the Truth, and it was in the 50s, 60s, and even modern days. And it was, will the real so-and-so please stand up? And so I kind of wanted to have some brevity today and kind of patterned after that, saying my topic of this presentation is, will the real Elvis Presley Book of Mormon please come forth? And so what I wanted to connect with you regarding was, there's a book in Salt Lake, and you know what? Hold on. I'm gonna go up. There it is. So the topic is, will the real Elvis please stand up? And I wanted to have a conversation regarding Elvis and Mormonism. And a brief introduction, many of you know me or know my voice. I am a creator for a YouTube series called Book of Mormon Editions. And each video is 4 or 5 minutes long regarding a specific copy or a specific printing or a series of the Book of Mormon, both from Salt Lake and non-Salt Lake, third-party editions, study guides, anything that has text of the Book of Mormon in it is a part of my YouTube series. And so this kind of goes right down my path. And I wanted to just connect with everyone regarding it. And it's really interesting. I had never heard about an Elvis Book of Mormon connection before until recently. I wanted to kind of make some notes and some details on it. So to kind of start off, this all started as well with Lisa Marie Presley passing away just a couple of months ago. And so with that, there was some added conversation regarding Elvis Presley and the Presley family, Graceland, and everything else. And periodically, LDS conversation will come up. And so, the LDS Mormon community has a relationship with Elvis. And there's a book, including a Book of Mormon that supposedly was given him. And so I wanted to kind of take some time regarding that. So every now and then there's a news article or a special interest piece regarding a copy of the Book of Mormon that resides in church archives in Salt Lake City. I'm going to mention church archives or as well Mormon nicknames and things like that. And I want to kind of paraphrase, or I want to preface it by saying a lot of the times that I'll be talking will be kind of connected with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City. I know that the community that I'm presenting to is far vast, more than just Salt Lake, but bear with me if I use vocabulary the church or Mormon, things like that, in terms of Salt Lake or those associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, in the church archives in Salt Lake, there is a Book of Mormon that resides in the church archives. It was received by the church and it was labeled Elvis's personal copy of the Book of Mormon. This is a, okay. Then I want to talk about the connection with the Osmonds. Many of us know that the Osmond music family was are members of the Salt Lake Church, and they were very closely related or very closely interacted with Elvis. And then also, in addition to them, Elvis was friends with a lot of LDS Mormons, as well as he even had employees that were members of the church. And so there's quite a few connections and stories and some documentation regarding his interactions with the faith. So here we go. There is a copy. This picture is a copy of the Book of Mormon that's held in church archives. When it was received as Elvis's personal copy of the Book of Mormon. And this is a 1976 missionary blue cover copy with a gold angel Moroni on the front. This was very common with a very common missionary edition, and the book that the church was printing for missionary use, as well as gifting and scripture study for its teenagers. And everybody has this particular copy of the Book of Mormon. When this volume was donated to the church in 1989 by a fan by the name of Cricket Coulter, and I was looking at some news articles, as well as if you just Google Cricket Coulter, she's considered a super fan of Elvis Presley, almost to the point of like no other pictures of her are without Elvis Presley in it. And so because of it, there's superstars and superheroes and super athletes, and she was a super fan of Elvis Presley. And so because of it, she in 1989, she had this edition of the Book of Mormon, and she gave it to Alan Osmond. And Alan Osmond's Alan Osmond gave it to the church in 1989. And so all the time you hear there's been conversations and various faith promoting stories that Elvis Presley was reading the Book of Mormon. And so with that being said, it was kind of interesting going through this particular story of this particular Book of Mormon. And for years, it was known as Elvis's Book of Mormon. And so not until recently, in 2018, there was a church historian by the name of Keith Erickson. And he pulled the copy of the Book of Mormon out and started doing some research and actually published some papers. I'll refer you to, if you look up Keith Erickson and Elvis Book of Mormon, there's a couple of articles on it. He specifically wrote an article in BYU Studies that identified this edition of the Book of Mormon. And throughout this book, if you look at the very last page, there's some annotations on it. The very front, in the very front, there's a signature. And the story goes that, or the analysis goes that almost every fourth or fifth page, there's a comment. For example, when it talks about, the Savior being the King of the world, or, things like that, he would say, there's only one King, and that's the Savior, Jesus Christ. And there's a lot of emphasis in these annotations that he was reading through it, or he was reading through it, and he wanted it for his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. And so that's the connection regarding it as well. So the analysis behind it was that the book was given to Elvis Presley, or so the story goes, the book was given to Elvis Presley 2 weeks before his death in 1977. And ultimately, Keith Erickson made a call and made an analysis, and he says it's not real from Elvis Presley. And a couple of things that he concluded is he sent pictures to handwriting analysts that knew Elvis Presley handwriting. And all of the analysts came back and said, unfortunately, this looks good, but it's not Elvis's signature. And so there's a lot of handwriting analysis, and there's a lot of material in this copy of the Book of Mormon in Salt Lake that they did go through and said, unfortunately, the signatures weren't there, and all the various annotations meant that this was not Elvis's handwriting. The other part about it is the provenance on this particular copy of the Book of Mormon says that it was given to Elvis Presley in 1977 in like July or very early August of 1977. And so that became a bit of suspicion, as well as that meant he only had it a few weeks prior to his death. However, his last 2 weeks have been documented as a very busy time. One day he reserved a complete amusement park for his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. So that was one day. And then he was also making plans to and rehearsing and practicing to go on tour in a couple of weeks afterwards, or in the next few weeks afterwards. He was also there was also a news story in the last 2 weeks of his life, that the news story came out of his drug addictions, and he was really mindful, as well as worried and focused, and had lots of time spent on trying to do some damage control regarding that article on his drug use. And unfortunately, it was the case that he was using. And so because of it, the annotations, or the provenance says that the last 2 weeks of his life was very, very busy. And so because of it, it became suspicious regarding him having the time to read the full Book of Mormon in the 2 weeks time, and taking enough time to write and annotate in the margins of this book throughout the whole of the Book of Mormon. And so not just read the book, but actually like study it and pause to write notes and back and forth. And so it would take a lot of time reading the Book of Mormon and annotating it at that length. So unfortunately, Heath Erickson made the decision, or made the announcement, that this particular copy of the Book of Mormon was not real. What I liked about this particular story is Alan Osman was a factor in this, because Cricket Coulter gave the book to Alan Osman, and Alan Osman gave the book to the church for its archives. And some of the articles say that Alan Osman was contacted in 2018 saying, hey, what do you think about this news story that came out regarding the Book of Mormon not being real, or the Elvis Presley book not being a real Elvis Presley book? And he mentioned something that he says, he appropriately stated that the church is true despite whether or not the book belonged to Elvis. And he said the Book of Mormon is significant even if this isn't an Elvis book. And I think it's a wonderful response, as it validates that a copy of the Book of Mormon, owned by Elvis or not, is not the basis of one's faith regarding the Book of Mormon. So in terms of the Osmonds, it was very documented that the Osmond family and Elvis were very good friends. It was so close that they had been reported by multiple sources that they either performed or practiced, had lots of personal time together. So much that the family matriarch was Olive Osmond, and she's the lady in these pictures. And Olive was very influential around promoting the Osmonds and the Osmond family. And she was very connected with Elvis Presley. And so she connected both musically and socially with Elvis, and the Osmond family in general was good friends to Elvis. And so because of it, it's been known as well that, or it was documented that Olive Osmond gave Elvis Presley a Book of Mormon. She was notorious for giving Book of Mormon, the copies of the Book of Mormon, to significant either performers or significant people that the Osmond family interacted with. And so, yes, Olive Osmond gave Elvis a Book of Mormon. And so what was interesting is also for future use, or for reference, Stephen Pineacker from Mormon Book Reviews did an interview with Gaynor Brunson. And Gaynor Brunson, if you remember him, he was a trumpet player with 4 other brothers called the Brunson Brothers. And they were trumpeters in the 1980s that were really great, good music. And so they had performed, so Stephen Pineacker did an interview with Gaynor Brunson, and Gaynor became a sound engineer after the music career was phasing out or so. And so Gaynor Brunson is also known as a sound engineer, and he's done sound engineering for various artists, including the Osmonds and several other LDS and traditional musicians. And so because of it, he was very in the know on the Osmond family as well. Gaynor mentioned that he was honored to do Merrill Osmond's last concert, and he was he was honored also to be a large part of the Osmond discography throughout the year. And so specifically, he tells a story about Merrill Osmond, and where Merrill states that his mom Olive gave Elvis a copy of the Book of Mormon. And so after Elvis passed away, the story goes from Gaynor Merrill received the Book of Mormon back and probably gave it to the church. So it's unclear if maybe Gaynor's story is a part of mixing the cricket culture denoted edition, or if there's more to the Osmond edition in terms of the Salt Lake Church having an Osmond given Book of Mormon from Elvis as well. However, the one thing that I want to kind of express is that it seems that the cricket culture edition that we just shown is very different than the Osmond copy of the Book of Mormon. The Osmond copy was given to Elvis much earlier, and the cricket culture one that I mentioned was only given to Elvis like the last 2 weeks of his life. So it would be interesting pursuing this Osmond copy and finding out what really happened to this edition. Unfortunately, it's hearsay until I speak to the Osmond family or we get some details from the Osmond family. Overall, it was really interesting that to see how much the Osmonds really connected with Elvis when Elvis was alive, as well as that Olive Osmond was very influential on giving out copies of the Book of Mormon. And one thing I wanted to really express is that the Osmond Book of Mormon is not the one that was showcased in 2018, and the cricket culture book seems to not fit the Osmond story very well. So continuing onward, though, what was really interesting is Elvis had a lot of friends that were Mormons or members of the Salt Lake Church. One of them specifically was a gentleman by the name of Ed Parker. And Ed Parker was a martial arts trainer that also became Elvis's martial arts, his bodyguard. And so he was part bodyguard and part martial arts trainer. And so he had quite an opportunity to be with Elvis on a personal basis. One of the stories that Ed talks about is that Ed and Elvis were driving through California and going through Ed's either hometown or where he lived at the time. And he visited Ed. Elvis made a stop to visit Ed's daughter. And in the LDS community, the teenagers go to a class called seminary. And the seminary is kind of the high school equivalent of studying the scriptures for the high schoolers. And so usually they do it either at an early morning before school starts, or maybe the first period of a release time for high schoolers. And so the story is that Elvis and Ed Parker went to the early morning LDS seminary class, and Elvis took the time to meet with the kids, shake hands, and he gave compliments to the kids regarding their dedication of learning and encouraged to keep up the good work. And so all the kids were super excited that they, met Elvis in seminary, and they were kind of laughing, saying that, it's incentive to come to seminary class because Elvis might visit again or so. And so it was known that it resulted that Ed stated that he gave Elvis a copy of the Book of Mormon also. And so Elvis received a copy from his bodyguard, Ed Parker. And additional research suggests that Elvis received more than 5 copies of the Book of Mormon throughout his career or throughout his life. This was, and as I'm looking through it, it's actually really common for celebrities to receive copies of the Book of Mormon. As missionary-minded members want to give a prized possessions to those that they either love or admire. So we've got Cricket Coulter, who's a super fan who did all things Elvis and really latched onto a Book of Mormon, whether it was his or not. We have got the Osmonds, we've got the bodyguards. The one picture expressed here is he did a film in Hawaii, and much of the filming was at the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii. And the Polynesian Culture Center is property owned by the LDS Church. And so because of it, he spent a long time there filming at the Polynesian Cultural Center and around in Hawaii. And so there was often opportunities for other members of the church to give Elvis a copy of the Book of Mormon while he was at the Polynesian Cultural Center. So, yeah, so it's been said that Queen Elizabeth got a couple, King Charles has a couple, Winston Churchill has specifically more than 2 copies of the Book of Mormon, and that was in the 1940s, 50s. And so for Winston Churchill to get 2 copies of the Book of Mormon, it makes sense that in the 70s, when copies of the Book of Mormon were more prevalent, that celebrities would get more and more of them as well. And so religious stories abound regarding Elvis and his association also with Protestants. Some of the Protestant stories I've heard is that he was just as excited and just as exuberant with the Protestants and other members of various religions. And I thought this was interesting. It's actually a testimony of Elvis. It was a testimony to Elvis's accommodation to his personality, as well as to support other people's passions, no matter the religion. So it seems that the Book of Mormon or LDS Gospel did not have a monopoly on Elvis's religious interests. However, in this case, with the Book of Mormon and Elvis, there were opportunities. And it's interesting to kind of track these down. So if I had all of the resources and all of the time and all of the influence, it's really interesting. When I first got on this journey, Stephen said, "Hey, you got to research the Elvis Book of Mormon in Salt Lake." And so I researched that, and the news article was that Elvis's Book of Mormon is not Elvis's Book of Mormon in Salt Lake, or the Book of Mormon in Salt Lake is not Elvis's. Sorry, Elvis has left the building. And so it was really kind of a downtrodden. But then if I would have stopped there, it would have been if you will, a dead end. But then more questions come up regarding the Osmonds and Ed Parker and things like that. And so it's real interesting that you have more questions that get answered when you go through these, through this research. So if I had all of the resources, these were the questions, and that's still open, is that where is the Osmond Book of Mormon? Truly, did Olive Osmond get it, and give it to Elvis? And did Merrill Osmond get it back? And where is it? When did Olive give it to him, and how? And what's the circumstances behind that? I'd love to confirm the Ed Parker story of the Book of Mormon, specifically when, where, and how did Ed give Elvis a copy of the Book of Mormon? And then it results in, okay, so where is it now? And then is there a list of what's in the Elvis library at Graceland? And is there a copy of the Book of Mormon that's still in the bookshelves in Elvis's library? So it's really interesting kind of going through this. What I like about this is that it really showed Elvis's affection to all of the denominations, and he showed accommodations to anybody that he came in contact with. And so with being LDS, as well as looking at the Book of Mormon, or kind of seeing stories about the Book of Mormon, it's really interesting to investigate the Book of Mormon and all things Elvis, or all things Mormon with Elvis. The challenge that I have is the longer that we get after his passing, now it's, well, good golly, 45 plus years of his passing. And time is an enemy, that the longer you get, the more stories of, oh yeah, Elvis's Book of Mormon is in Salt Lake, and this story has been perpetuated until somebody finally in 2018 kind of did a really in-depth analysis on it and said, there was a mistake on it. The fun part about it, though, is it's also an opportunity to look at research. And on a side note, I was listening to somebody was talking about folklore and Mormonism and folklore and all of the pioneer stories. And there was some debunking of kind of some pioneer stories. And so kind of some of the critics will say, well, if there is anything that's been exaggerated, you need to throw it out because it's completely false or things like that. And so the challenge I have also is, we've had this Elvis Book of Mormon, and many members have used this as a conversation tool or a faith promoting tool, saying, oh yeah, Elvis was reading the Book of Mormon when he died, and they took that for face value. So yeah, on one end you have members of the church that will take an Elvis Book of Mormon for face value for years, and on others you have critics that will say, well, because it's been exaggerated, then you need to throw it all out. And I'd like to kind of come to a happy medium of saying that with research comes more questions. And if you actually have more questions than you have answers by the time you've done your research, you're actually doing well, because I think research is an open-ended question. And if you come off and you think that you have all of the answers and you shut your research down, then you've done a huge disservice, because there's going to be far more questions as we get deeper into it. And so the bottom line that I wanted to bring forth on this was that there is a copy of the Book of Mormon in Salt Lake that was purported to be Elvis's Presley Book of Mormon for 30 years, from 1987 all the way through 2018. And so unfortunately in 2018, it says, I'm sorry, that Book of Mormon is not Elvis's book. However, he was given several copies of the Book of Mormon. And one of the emphasis that I kind of went through is Alan Osmond's story really solidified it for me, as I am a big fan of the Book of Mormon. And I love reading it, and I love kind of seeing provenance on specific copies of the Book of Mormon. And the provenance on the Salt Lake copy is real interesting to see, because it was given and, people thought about it. And so it's wonderful to ask, okay, why did people think this? And, what's the background behind this particular Salt Lake copy, even if it's not. But I want to express that the Book of Mormon is awesome, even if it's not from Elvis. So I was thinking about wearing maybe collars or something like that, and trying to do ahas and things like that. But I'm not too much of an Elvis impersonator. But it's been really fun seeing how Elvis Presley influenced the lives of members of the church, as well as other individuals, and how affectionate he was to anybody that he came in contact with. So in general, that's what I've got. And I was really excited about this. And yeah, I know that this is open-ended. And a lot of times people say, well, I've concluded my research and this is it. And my message in my presentation is that this is open, and it continues to be open, even if one story of one copy of one Book of Mormon in archives went down the wrong path. So I'm going to turn it back over. And that's kind of what I've got in terms of, will the real Elvis Presley Book of Mormon please come forth? That's hard to say, and it's still out there. So thank you, everyone.
Okay. Like the gallery, so we'll have a chance to speak. But let me begin with questioning, because I'm intrigued by the properties, and thank you very much for your research and presentation. I think that someone as popular as the King is certainly of interest to an awful lot of people. I'd like to take you back to my earlier comment in the prayer, that this evening we seek the balance between love, romantic, and divine. And Elvis, with his music, clearly was pushing for the romantic. To what extent do you think he was pushing for the divine?
Oh, that's a good question. Elvis was a very spiritual man, and he was looking for the divine in a lot of ways. And once again, the Christian or the non-restoration groups, the traditional Christians or the Protestants, have far more stories around Elvis Presley and his faith and his Bible Belt, what Alabama, Mississippi. Oh, where did he come from? I don't know. But, once again, he was raised in the gospel music. And so he was very spiritually minded and very open to being okay with other people as they continued their journey as well.
All right, the process, ladies and gentlemen, is to, if you can go to the bottom of the screen and find the reactions button and hit the reactions, then raise your hand. We have Deb on board to coordinate the calls, and we have a couple hands up. So let's open it up for questions and answers.
Okay, we have Monty and then Shane. Go ahead, please, Monty.
Okay, let's see. Well, first off, I wanted to say I think that was a great presentation and I appreciate it. I was having a little fun with it as you were talking about it. My mind goes in strange ways, but I mean, the folks are out there that care more about whose book it was, and it was never Elvis's book in the first place. But I mean, even if it was a copy that was on his bookshelf, it was never a book written by him. And so it didn't really reflect Elvis as much as people is designed to talk about. The other thing was the first book of Mormon I read cover to cover, and it was a freebie. It was one that was handed to me by someone who was real concerned, missionary minded lady. And that book blew my mind. But and I'm sorry to say that over the years, I've confronted my guilt in the fact that the first Bible I had, I stole. And I've been trying ever since then to mend my fences there and find out where the person is it belongs to and give it back to them. If y'all have ever heard of a guy named Gideon, let me know, because the Bible had his name on it.
Love it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Monty. Okay, Shane and then Carol. Go ahead, Shane.
Yes, well, your presentation was very meaningful to me, being that you're probably not going to believe this, but I am a part-time Elvis tribute artist. My hair is detachable, of course, and Paul, you can vouch for me because remember at the John Whitmer meeting on the 70s dress up day, I was in my burning love suit. Remember that, Paul?
Right. Oh,
Yeah. And anyway, I was wondering if you had ever heard of a movie called Tears of a King. Apparently, it was about Elvis and his relationship to the Book of Mormon. I never saw it, and I've been trying to find it forever on various streaming services. But I was wondering if you were familiar at all with that movie and how accurate it may have been.
Good question. And one of maybe the references that once again is Keith Erickson did a couple of research on that unfortunately often movie producers or movie studios would come to the church archives and ask for that book. And so that book was actually checked out often as a faith promoting story when they did, or when Salt Lake or any Salt Lake minded production company would do documentaries on Elvis and Mormonism and things like that. So it's been perpetuated often. I don't know about that specific one, but yeah, unfortunately, when news stories come out, or hey, it's the 20th anniversary of or the X anniversary of Elvis's death, and oh, by the way, let's pull the book out of church archives. That's been perpetuated often. And so from 1987 through 2018, they thought that book was an Elvis book, that they actually used it often, carte blanche. And yeah, a lot of critics will say, well, you should have done your research, and they just took it for face value. And so I don't know that one specifically, but it makes sense that it was perpetuated often.
Were you finished, Shane? Okay, thank you. Carol, go ahead, please.
Am I coming through?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Robert, for your message and your sharing. I've got my own Book of Mormon. But late in the 70s, I went on vacation to Hollywood. And I was on, it was a decision to go visit the Walk of the Stars about midnight. And it was great. It was beautiful and all the lights were shining. And I decided to pick a star to stand on, which happened to be Elvis Presley's. And the moon was almost full and all starry-eyed. It was so cool to see it. As soon as we were done viewing the stars, my sister-in-law and I got back into the vehicle, and it came over the radio. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you, Elvis Presley has just passed away. So on the other side, standing on his star when he passed is kind of a reminder that God is no respecter of persons to me. That's what I took away from it, was that we are all of equal value. Thank you.
And I think an icon like Elvis Presley kind of creates that for us, that we kind of cling to the good in the world. And, you know, certainly Elvis had his demons, but in general, he influenced so many people, as well as, you know, the Lord uses people like that in our lives to bless us, as well as to make ourselves feel better when we go through. So I'm glad that you had that experience. And yeah, it's very common that Elvis would be an icon that would make us feel closer to God just because he was around.
Okay. Dale Warren, go ahead, please.
J.D. Sumner and the Stamps Quartet traveled with Elvis several years as backup singers. And it is often said that after a concert, they would go up to the room and Elvis and the Stamps Quartet would spend a lot of time singing gospel music. And as a gospel music lover, and of course, I was very familiar with the Stamps Quartet, but they were a part of his ministry for a number of years.
Yeah, and once again, I'm a younger generation, and I'm embarrassed to say I'm a generation outside of Elvis. I really didn't know, but historically, his upbringing is his first music was gospel music, and then adapted. So many of the, unfortunately, I would say many of the older generation, not me, I never knew it, but yeah, he had various morphings, and you know, he came from a gospel music background and then morphed to rock and roll and everything else. But you could hear, and you can hear his influence in the music, and I'm glad that he had a gospel music foundation.
Stephen's popping in here, Robert. So Paul, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Go ahead.
Wanted to put in a plug for the Polynesian Culture Center in Hawaii. Having been there a couple of times, appreciated the remarkable cultural portrayal one picks up there, the diversity of representation across the islands. My wife was extraordinarily pleased to run into relatives and acquaintances when we were there last, to be able to find people that knew the people that she knew when she was growing up. In one place, one of the staff members had grown up just down the block from Rena, and for them to be able to share their long-term memories was gratifying.
Yeah, I think everyone has a visit to the Polynesian Cultural Center. One thing that I didn't know, and this is kind of something that I probably need to research even further, but it was interesting that Elvis's visit to the Polynesian Cultural Center actually influenced the tourists, and there was a growth of tourism at the Polynesian Cultural Center after Elvis visited. And so, yeah, if you want to increase your tourism, just say Elvis came, and then it increased tourism for after that particular movie.
As you can tell from my introduction, I was fond of at least one of Elvis's tunes and sang it to my wife on occasion. And the fact that I just was intrigued by that bridge between the romantic and the divine. And I still am, because I still carry both of those kinds of bridges with her. And it is so meaningful when you can see the similarities in meaning and the actually conjunction of meanings in a song like that, to appreciate that you may be talking about your sweetheart, be talking about the divine at the same time, is probably intentional in that construction. Well, with the pause, let me thank all of you who have been so kind to give me your condolences in the past week. It has just been a very uplifting experience to receive the fond memories. The fact that some of you have noted that she has stolen the show from behind me without me ever knowing it. The fact that that I've received such remarkable statements from people like Christopher Thomas, who is Pentecostal, and Stephen Pinecker, who is evangelical. These are people who read the Book of Mormon and appreciate something of its message, have shared with us, and here they recognize there's something special and love about my wife as well. And the fact that so many of you have been so kind is something that I wanted to express my appreciation for this evening. I particularly wanted to note a rather beautiful comment that I received from Bill Shepard, our Strangite representative. He mentioned a poem that has been, I think, important in the Strangite movement, about a lady who was 24 years old and died and leaving 4 small children. And the concluding phrase in that poem is as follows: "Rest then, sweet sister, for brief is the night. The morning light beameth me now in our sight. How joyous thy greeting of kindred and friend, how blissful the merging, where partings shall end." I find partings to be very difficult. And to look forward to the time when we're in that dimension where the partings don't have to end, or we don't have to end with partings, that we can stay together and continue to celebrate the Lord, celebrate eternity together. That is something to look forward to, that lifts my spirit and pleases me. But it's so uplifting to have friends that reach out, and I say thank you to every one of you who has been so kind. May you be blessed. It ought to be that there's where people are laughing when we're talking about Elvis. I would think there's so much that should be humorous.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing an Elvis, speaking this and doing this presentation in an Elvis speak, and quite frankly, I don't know his call very well, but Paul, I wanted to acknowledge you on your Nauvoo dig. It's been interesting kind of seeing you from the sidelines around that. And one of the things that somebody's got some.
Thank you.
Okay. One of the things that I've recognized is that, in doing research, it almost creates more open-ended opportunities than anything that you can actually finalize. And so, Paul, you probably kind of know this around your background and around the dig sites and things like that, that, when you find one answer, 2 more questions open up as well. So it's been wonderful. And I think the lesson and the message that I've come through this particular one is that if you have more questions at the end of your project, you're actually doing good research. That it's never ending, as well as the more you dig into it, the more answers you get, but the more opportunity you have to find more answers. So
Thank you for that comment. And that reinforces the Buckminster Fuller comment in his marvelous book, Synergetics, in which he says, at the conclusion of any good question, there's a whole world of new questions to be addressed. And that certainly is true in the world of archaeology, because for every question that we're able to get answered, we are undoubtedly going to find many more. That's one of the reasons the editors have told me that nobody wants to read my 1,000-page book, divided into 3 books. And so maybe people would want to read it that way. And I'm having difficulty getting it down to 3. Nobody wants to read a 1,000-page book. I do, but apparently editors or publishers don't see it that way.
yeah.
Okay, Monty has his hand up. Go ahead, Monty. Unmute, please.
Yeah, Paul's been married 52 years, but I've only been married 50 years. So I guess I got what they call a fly-by-night romance. Just, you know, one of those situations where I've got a ways to go yet. But we dearly love Rena, and we love you, and we're your whole family, really. And we're thinking about you. We really are.
Well, thank you, Monty. And I warn you, be careful about being a fly-by-night. Nancy might very well give you a swatting. Let me go back, Robert, to your earlier comment. We were working on the times and seasons last summer, and we came up with 60 some pieces of type, but we had a very small crew. And I'm anticipating that in this summer coming that we will have a larger crew and be able to finish out that project so that building can be restored. And the prospect of being able to answer enough questions for that building to be restored is fascinating. One of the questions that's come up from our exploration, my brother David, who I think I saw on here a while ago, helped to identify this last summer that Water Street goes by perpendicular to Main and Bain and other streets that are the north-south ones in Nauvoo. But Water Street is not is an original structure, not a Mormon period structure. It was simply expanded. We found he measured and found that it was expanded. We go past the red brick store, past the homestead, past the mansion house, past the stable, and then it constricted, and by the time it got down to the highway on the east, it was down to about 47 feet, whereas the 66 feet, and it goes by the main Smith family properties. And so the question of when was that street straightened through there? What was the original pathway? And therefore it relates to the Times and Seasons building, because there are 2 foundations there, and it appears the earlier foundation was not quite north and south, and so therefore it probably was pre-Mormon and would have aligned then with the earlier Water Street. So the questions when you dig and start coming up with things like this, rather fascinating. In addition, that site last summer produced one projectile point that takes us back to the Middle Archaic, some 7,000 years ago. And to be able to show that we have this vast history behind the Mormon period on that site is fascinating to me. We have found 10,000 years of occupation on it, back to the mammoth hunters, and then here's some archaic bison hunters. We have the first pottery, and all of these If I had the pictures for you tonight, Rena excavating the canine that dates back 5,000 years. That was one of her specialties, with paintbrush and bamboo sliver. But to be able to see that people were using their hunting 5,000 years ago at Nauvoo, and we have that burial, then to see the other burials on the site. The Smith Family Cemetery has about 25 burials in it, but there are 25 additional prehistoric burials we found, 14 of them from the Middle Woodland period, about 2,000 years old, another 11 from 2,500 years ago, the early Woodland period. And to recognize this place has been sacred for 2,000 plus years to its previous inhabitants before the Mormons got there. That to me is raises a whole bunch of questions about how we present, because it isn't just a sacred site for the Mormons. Even though Mormons come to look for 5 years in Joseph Smith history, there's 10,000 years of sacred on that site. You're muted, Robert.
I was gonna say, congratulations, good for you, that's amazing.
Floor is still open for points of inquiry or questions, please, ladies and gentlemen. Well, if we don't have questions, then let me sing to you. Good night, the Lord is watching over you. Good night, his blessings go before you. Good night, and we'll be praying for you. So good night, may God bless you. Sorry, Rena's no longer here to sing that with me, but I'll do the best I can, and still the same blessings are pronounced. May God love you. Love the people of Zion. That would be her message. Love the people of Zion.